Hello, my name is Doug Kluck. I'm the Regional Climate Services Director for NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information. I'm based in Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm going to give a brief here over 2020, what happened in 2020, and where we're headed in 2021. Um, yeah. For allowing me to speak to you all today. Hopefully, you'll get something out of this. Let's go to the next slide here. So the agenda today is to, like I said, recap what happened in 2020, sort of put a perspective on that in terms of the past, and talk a little bit about 2020 extremes. Some pretty important things happened in 2020, if you want to remember, and then a little bit about the 2021 cold event, and then some outlooks for the future, near-term future, really, for the most part. All right, so here's 2020, a graph looking back since 1880 to now, sketching or graphing all of the points, all the temperatures for each year. You can see a definite trend to the right as you decade as well as in the points, and it's definitely upward in terms of warmth across the Earth. Actually, this is a worldwide graphic for what happened in 2020. Well, what happened in 2020 and every year before that. Here's where 2020 ranks in terms of all of the other years on record back to 1880. Note 2020 just barely did not set a record, but it was very, very close to the warmest year on record. Those are the years, the top 10, if you will, years for temperature on the Earth since 1880. You may notice there is a bit of a trend there. Most of those are pretty recent. In fact, all of them are since 2005. This is a graphic or a map of 2020 in terms of where it was warm or warmest, and actually some places where it was actually a bit cooler than normal. The red colors indicate warmth, departure from normal, if you will, from 81 to 2010 baseline specifically. So you can see in Siberia and places like that, things were much warmer. And if you're into climate and La Nina and El Nino, you can tell where the La Nina set up in the eastern Pacific there along the equator, and those waters were a little bit cooler than normal. But generally dominated, warm temperatures dominated the Earth as a whole. Next slide really puts this in a better perspective. These are annual trends through 2020. The graphic on the left looks only at the 1991 through 2020 period in terms of temperature trend. And again, the darker the red colors, the more the trend in terms of increasing temperature. The image on the right really takes into a much longer period of time, 1901 to 2020, also showing the trend being positive in almost every place, except for just off of Greenland, where fresh water coming off the Greenland plateau actually cools the water there somewhat. Next slide is showing the global outlook, believe it or not, for 2021. These are the percentages of chances of what 21 will likely be in terms of how cold or warm it's going to be. So very good chance of being above normal, number one. A very good chance of being in the top 10 year, as a matter of fact, in terms of warmth across the world. Now focusing in a little bit more on the United States. 2020 was the warmest year since, or fifth warmest year, sorry, since 1895. You can see as a whole what the United States looks like. Of course, we don't have Alaska or Hawaii in here, but just the contiguous 48 states. And you can see wherever it's pink, temperatures were warmer than normal. And you see that concentrated in the west, southwest, and the northeast in this case, and actually in Florida for that matter. This is a depiction of, if you want to break it down by county, you could go in here and look at each of these counties to see how much above that particular county was. This is something that's relatively new in terms of what NOAA can provide. So if you're interested in county level data in the past, or what's happened so far, we do have that, and we can get that for you. It's online as well. One can go find that. This is the entire year, January through December, and the temperature anomaly for that period. The next slide, something else we do on a routine basis, is this shows you the ranking of 126 years of record, ranking of where we are in that ranking by state. So again, darker the color in terms of towards red, the warmer. And you can see the rankings there. No state did set a record in terms of warmth. However, you can see a whole bunch of states about 125 and very close to the record in terms of their warmth in 2020. In the Midwest and the Great Plains, we were a little bit cooler. I put quotes on that, even though it was warmer than normal, but cooler certainly than the coasts in the South. In terms of precipitation, generally speaking, dry in the West, wet in the Southeast, and somewhere around average for 75 to 125% of normal of precipitation in those white or gray, light gray areas that you can see there. This again is 2020. And then here's the ranking of the states in terms of wetness or dryness. And the colors that are sort of brown indicate drier than normal conditions. You see records in Nevada and Utah. And you see the green shading states tend to be on the wetter side, and those are much above average if it's the darker green. Here in the Midwest, in Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, it's kind of a mixed bag. Missouri was a little bit above normal, quite a bit above normal, and then Iowa, Nebraska, both below. Kansas somewhere in between. So next slide shows you what events made the cut, if you will, in terms of billion-dollar disasters. And it was a banner year. I hate to say that, but it was true. A banner year for record events, including numerous hurricanes, which I'm actually going to talk a little bit about, as well as wildfires. I know that's not a concern. Maybe wildfires a little bit, but not hurricanes as much. But it's such a phenomenal year. I decided I'd throw a graphic or two at you since someone had made these already. So thanks to them. It was a banner year for hurricanes and tropical systems, and set records in terms of the number, at the earliest, the latest, and all that kind of stuff. So there's the chart, or the infamous chart of all the hurricanes and tropical storms that we had last year. And a little bit more about that in terms of landfalling Atlantic tropical cyclones. You can see that by that graphic, it goes from 1950 to now. We have a peak, obviously, in 2020. 12 named storms made landfalls, breaks the record of 9 way back in 1916. And 5 named storms made landfall in Louisiana alone, poor Louisiana, on record for any state in any single season. Never have 5 hit a single state, even Florida. And then shifting to wildfires, just briefly, 10.3 million acres burned, mostly in California and Colorado. Record size wildfires were indicated. 5 of the 6 largest wildfires in state history in California, and in Colorado, close to home, 3 of the largest fires on record, all in 2020. One beat the next, and the next beat the next, as if you will. So many thousands or millions of acres really covered by those things. And if you remember, we saw the smoke from those over us for many weeks, if you remember correctly. Beautiful sunsets and sunrises, but probably not great for breathing and such. And just another chart here on wildfires showing from 1983, which is when we started charting these, to now, we did set a record in terms of acres consumed. Okay. Shifting gears quite a bit to February of this year, and we're going to talk a little bit about the cold. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but I thought since it just happened and it did make such an impact on many of us, we better talk about it. So, mostly looking at this from a February as a whole, uh, as opposed to just that sequence of events. I'll show a couple maps of different things here in just a moment. But the Arctic plunge, 19th coldest for the nation, 19th coldest February out of 127 years. It was the coldest for the nation since 1989. Winter, and I'm going to show you a map of this in a minute. Winter, December through February, however, was one in the top third in terms of warmest, which is kind of an odd thing to think about, even though it was so cold in February. Both Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas among the top 10 in coldest they've ever been for the month of February. And then 2019, I wanted to point this out. Someone had done a little research on this. 2019 in the Missouri Basin, if you just look at the Missouri Basin as a whole, was actually colder just a couple years ago. And the reason for that, as it turns out, is that February was cold from the 1st through the 28th. All 28 days were well below normal. This year, we actually had warmth at the end and warmth at the beginning, a little bit above normal on both of those, which sort of balanced it out a little bit. But anyway, 2019 for much of the Missouri Basin was actually colder, which I found quite surprising. A little bit more about February, now honing in a little bit more on the dates of where the coldest air was, and this shows you where it was concentrated in Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, a little bit of Oklahoma and other places. That's the average temperature departure from average. So the mean temperature departure from average, which is more than 25 degrees below normal during that period. That's a pretty long period to be 25 degrees or below. It probably wasn't the entire time, but we did have times where we were 30 and 40 degrees below normal as well, especially as you go south. And just briefly, we set many records. Low maximum records were sort of the interesting thing. We set many low max records. So the high temperature for the day, in some cases, was lower, 10 degrees lower than the old record for the minimum of the same day. Think about that for a minute. So the maximum temperature for the day was 10 degrees colder than the old record for the minimum at some places. That's crazy. Yeah. And here we go with the how did winter stack up. If you look at December, January, and February as a whole, there's the rankings again on the left for temperature, and that just shows where things were warmer than normal and cooler than normal in terms of ranks from 126 years. Still, even with that cold outbreak in the Dakotas and to our north, it was warmer than normal. As you go south, if you talk about Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, we were right in the middle when you average those 3 months out. And if you remember, December and January really weren't that bad. They were actually relatively warm. If we didn't have that cold period in there, we'd be well above normal at this juncture. And then really quickly, there's the statewide precipitation rankings for the same period, December through February of last year into this year, our winter, if you will. Pretty close to normal in terms of precipitation, dry to our north and west. All right, so how did snowfall look in the I'll just say the 2020 to 21 snowfall season, which, as it indicates here, began at last July 1st and through March 15th, latest that I have. Definitely above normal in Nebraska and Iowa, especially with the latest snowfall out west in western Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, Front Range areas. They've got 2 to 3 feet. I'll say 1 to 3 feet of snow, relatively wet snow actually, out there, which is going to be, it's very bad when it happens and bad for livestock. But the good news is that area was pretty dry. In fact, you'll see it on a future map. how dry they really were. So anyway, mostly above normal in terms of snowfall in Nebraska, in Iowa, and somewhat below normal across Kansas into Missouri. And you can see North Dakota had a lot less than normal, and Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma had more than they ever have. In many ways snowfall, but it doesn't take that much to be above normal in terms of snowfall that far south. Okay, so I'm going to shift to the outlooks really quick here and talk a little bit about the upcoming weather and climate. So this will be updated a couple more times before you see this, but as of Monday afternoon, what is today, the 15th, this is what we call the quantitative precipitation forecast, which really means what's happening the next 7 days in terms of accumulated precipitation. So you see a wet pattern there. Wherever it's green means there's a prediction for precipitation. Now that ramps up pretty quickly to purples and other colors like that, where we're talking good rainfall, mostly rainfall, in some cases snowfall. In this case, it doesn't differentiate. It's total precipitation. So fairly wet conditions over the next few days, next 7 days, from Monday to Monday anyway. Then the next slide is the week 2 temperature and precipitation outlook. Again, this gets updated daily. So you're looking at Mondays as of March 15th, and we're looking out for about a week, And so the temperatures there on the left, you can see that the probability of above normal is heightened to our east and below normal to our west. So cool temperatures out west, warm to the east. And then in terms of precipitation, you see that there's a kind of a dry signal there. It's kind of a weak dry signal, but dry nonetheless. Southern part of Missouri has a weak wet signal, is what we would call that. So leaning one way or the other. And then here is weeks 3 and 4. Again, this is updated on a weekly basis, so this will be updated next Friday. But anyway, this is a pretty strong indication for above normal temperatures for this period, March 27th to the April 9th. Whenever you see probabilities that high, and we're talking 70% above normal chances, that's a pretty good indicator that it probably will happen. And then there's kind of a weaker probabilities for below normal temperatures over the region as well, for the most part, below normal precipitation chances. So warming up and staying, or getting dry, I guess you could say, weeks 3 and 4 is the outlook for now. And then if we extend this a little bit more, April, May, and June, again, temperatures on the left there, those are probabilities of being above normal. We see that we're pretty strong feeling for above normal, pretty strong confidence, I really should say, in terms of above normal, especially in Kansas, southern Missouri, in southernmost Nebraska, and slightly less, but still pushing or leaning towards above normal in the rest of the Midwest, and really across the whole nation, for that matter. There's no indication of below normal temperatures for April, May, and June. Now, precipitation-wise, on the right, lower right corner, you see below normal or brown colors, sort of to the west. That indicates a propensity to be dry. Colorado, Wyoming, where they really don't want to be or need to be, and across the west in general. And then to the east, there's a slight indication of wetter than normal conditions, really, but that's over the Great Lakes and Ohio Basin. And sort of this equal chances of anything could happen across most of the area. And then June, July, and August outlooks indicate pretty decent confidence in terms of temperatures being above normal for the summer, basically. At least it's leaning that way right now. And then in terms of precipitation, you still see this dryness, if you will, this sort of weak indication of dryness off to the west. And really, again, equal chances for above, below, and near normal for most of us in the region. And then a little bit about flooding this spring through June, actually, in this case. There's lower than usual risk to flooding generally across in the Missouri Basin as well as the upper Mississippi, and a little bit enhanced in the Ohio due to some wetness, previous wetness, antecedent conditions. But this is a pretty common spring map. This is not showing anything out of the ordinary in terms of widespread, major flooding or anything like that. Certainly not like 2019. In fact, it's this is pretty good for us. Now, will we get flooding? Yes. Are we having flooding in the next few days? Probably locally on a lot of feeder rivers and streams and things like that, but nothing major, at least yet. They're showing up on some of the major rivers in our area. So the risk of flooding is near normal to below normal, according to this, and portions of the Ohio Basin is in the above normal basin, but less here for us locally. The drought outlook, now remember, this is the drought outlook before the major snowfalls out to our west and rainfalls here across Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri. So this will change over the next couple weeks, and it'll probably get better. But we're still going to have to watch places that have really entrenched, what we call entrenched drought, especially to our west. We really needed that snow out there. It's going to be very helpful for a number of people, and it's bad, like I said, in the short term, and really tough on livestock. But in the long run, the livestock will benefit from better grasses and things like that. The outlook through the end of May for drought is that brown area more or less indicates that drought will persist in some form through that time, and that yellow area is a prediction for increasing drought or development of drought. So portions of Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas are sort of in the crosshairs, if you will, for drought continuing or increasing. Then finally, I wanted to show you some options if you care to use them. We do run a monthly North Central U.S. Climate Summary and Outlook webinar series on the third Thursday of every month. That's how you can register for it if you care to. It's pretty broad in terms of what we cover. So we cover about 16 states. And then we also do quarterly climate summaries and outlooks. I didn't put a link in there, but if you want a link or if you want sort of to get reminders or indications that these things are coming out, just write to me. I will put you on the list, and you can stay on there as long as you'd like. You can always take yourselves off. And I think, yep, that's all I have as of this time. And I thank you very much. I look forward to any questions that you might have. You can always write me or call me and provide those anytime. So thank you very much.